Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it is indeed a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing that we call life. Before we get going today, I want to mention, as you may notice, we are a man down. Not to worry though, Dr. B is doing fine. He had an engagement that precluded his attendance with us here tonight. But our episode is going to be, the topic of our episode is going to be about four specific pillars of independent infrastructure and how they interact, relate to the Black community. And those four pillars are banks, schools, hospitals, and grocery stores. So who wants to get us jumped off this evening? Just to kind of, get us jumped off just a little bit. Obviously, we know that in the Black community, those four pillars that we're talking about are severely lacking. Banks, schools, hospitals, and grocery stores. And I guess I shouldn't say severely lacking in a sense of, especially with schools, in a sense of them being there, but I guess the value, uh, you know, the money that's being poured into them, all those sorts of things, certainly with schools. But with regards to banks and grocery stores, and having Black owned banks and grocery stores, and having the right sort of funding for hospitals, those sorts of things are certainly severely lacking. So
I
anybody
think
on
I
the
think I totally agree with what you're saying. Um, we wouldn't want to say one was lacking, but I think we would be hard pressed to think of a community in the United States of America, a Black community that has all four pillars in one place. We've got one of the pillars. Some places have two of the pillars, but I can't think of any place just off of the top of my head that has all four pillars. And you think about the wealth that Tulsa had. They had banks, schools, hospitals, grocery stores. They were totally self-supporting, didn't need to go out to, outsource or import anything from any other communities. They were able to sustain us. They had even a little airport, they had it going on. So when you think about it, infrastructure is having all of the pieces and not just one or two of them.
Yeah, so great point, John. So it makes me wonder then, why has it been so difficult for the community to get back to that structure that was proven to work, right? And support those within the community, provide opportunities within the community, opportunities to prosper, basically to live whatever they considered the American dream to be. You know, I often wonder why it's been so difficult for us to get back to a model like that works to, you know, support one another, right? Uh, with our, unique experiences, background. Uh, and that's the thing I often wonder about, And I was thinking of this topic with respect to, and I'll take them one at a time, not necessarily all right now, but banks. You
Right.
know, and I've kind of looked into that. So what does it take to have a bank that considers the unique struggles of our community, right? And it takes investment with people who have done very well, that have a heart and mind to give back and to provide uh, a resource that the community can use to pursue those things like homes, businesses, uh, and it just doesn't seem to be enough of that. And then, one of the things that, that I've just kind of investigated was, what does it really take to create an account with an institution that's predominantly African American run and operated. And, it can be different, right? To say the least. And I think that that's where, it requires us to have conversations, not about being, exclusive necessarily, but how we can be inclusive, and then provide the type of experience that people have grown to expect here in the 21st century. Uh, and so that's one of the things I think about with regard to the banks, because without, you know, deposits and investments, then it's hard for them to make investments in other things that support the community and people that are pursuing businesses, home loans, and things of that nature. So, not a solution, but certainly something to consider. And regardless, I think that it is probably beneficial and worthwhile to support those institutions and find an avenue to become part of the voice for solutions on how to move that forward. And sometimes we'll just like no, they don't have mobile banking where I can take a picture of my check and deposit it. Yeah, I'm moving on to the next institution. You know, as opposed to really understanding the whys uh, that might not exist and what we can do to maybe help get it there. So, and I think that more so in the past, uh, in Tulsa, I think they saw a need to become as self-sufficient and independent within that community. And today, we're scattered about. Everyone's chasing a different thing, their own version of what they consider to be the American dream, uh, or you know, has hopelessness set in so much that that most people are, just really don't care one way or the other. So I think there are a lot of challenges there, but certainly something worth looking into.
One thing that I just feel, we're especially since we're just talking about banks right now. I mean, all four of them are important, but when it comes to a black-owned bank, a black-owned business, period, we have to support them. That's the one thing that, in my opinion, I've noticed. It seems like every community supports their own community except for the black community. We're quick to run to a Hispanic store or a Hispanic owned store or a Middle Eastern owned store, Korean store, a white owned store. But if it's a black store, it's like we don't want to patronize them. I don't know if it's because of the crab in the barrel syndrome, but to me, it's like we just don't want. Some folks just don't want to support them. You know, we just don't. It seems like we just don't invest in our own communities. I mean, I grew up in a small town. It was, there was, I called it a little bit of segregation. There was a white part of town, there was a black part of town, but and pretty much all the blacks congregated together, the whites congregated together. But we still didn't support black owned businesses. My mom was a prime example. She owned her own business. So my mom was a cosmetologist, and all the friends that she had before when she started the business, when they saw that she was starting to succeed, it was like, well, I'm not trying to give you my money. Or God forbid, my mom showed up with a Cadillac that my dad bought her, but well, my money is going to paying for your Cadillac. So they didn't want to see my mom get ahead. It wasn't about that. My mom was doing well, and my dad, was just showing his affection by getting my mom a car. All they saw was my money is going towards your car. So I'm paying for your car. Not the fact that you're paying for a service that my mom is doing for you that you can't do yourself. Again, and even with the black banks, man, like I said, we just don't invest in our communities. Um, it just, for me, it just all comes back to the crab in the barrel syndrome. It's like we don't want to see, or a lot of us do not want to see folks who look like us succeed. Where the other communities, they make sure that they support each other and help each
To
other
that
succeed.
point, there are plenty of statistics out there, and they tend to change just a little bit. The needle moves on them a little bit by year. But when you start talking about the circulation of dollars, right, within communities, and by circulation of dollars, it means how often or how long the dollar spent within a specific community continues to circulate and stay within that community, right? And so the higher circulation of dollars that are within a community, the greater the economic stability as well as opportunities for economic growth within those communities. So with that said, when there's a stat, and every year, like I said, it's roughly the same. The needle moves just a little bit, but when you look at the different communities, right? Within the Asian community, the dollar stays within the Asian community for 30 days, right? Within the Latino community, it's like 7 days. Within the Jewish community, it's 20 days. Within predominantly white communities, it's about 20 days. The dollar circulates in the Black community. Now, all of those 20, 30 days, even 7 days for the Hispanic community. In a Black community, the dollar circulates for 6 hours. Hours. Do you understand the ramifications of that? That's crazy just to even think of that. 30 days, 20 days, 7 days, 6 hours. We don't spend money in our own communities. And there are a variety of reasons for that. I don't think I have time to get into all of it, but the two main reasons that come to mind is one, because people just we don't have the businesses there to spend in the Black community quite often, right? And then oftentimes we don't realize sometimes that things are there. Like, I don't even know, when I talk to some Black people about Black banks specifically, they're like, a Black bank, I didn't know that there was a such thing as a Black owned banks. And there aren't a ton of them out there, but they exist, right? They do exist. It just takes you doing a little bit of research and finding out. And I understand that it can be hard to keep the dollar circulating in the Black community when it's hard to find Black owned businesses, right? There are two different, there's a TED Talk and then there's a Netflix show, right? There's a TED Talk by a Maggie Anderson. She did a TED Talk where she did this empowerment experiment where her and her family attempted to purchase solely Black owned products for 1 year. Right. And then you have Killer Mike, the rapper Killer Mike, and also activist, who has a show called Trigger Warning with Killer Mike that aired in 2019, where he kind of did the same thing, where he went around and hit specifically in his community in Houston, and just tried to spend on Black owned businesses alone. And it's tough. It's a challenge. If you watch those two things, you'll see exactly what I mean. So it's hard. because the black-owned businesses just aren't there. Enough of them aren't there. But the ones that are there need support. We have to support them, right?
Right.
And then when you talk about the banks, since that's specifically what we're talking about right now, the black-owned banks that are there, right? They are generally there to economically empower the underserved communities, right? Which being black, historically black communities. Um, they generally will give mortgages, loans, accounts, or whatever to people of color who wouldn't otherwise receive them from other banks, predominantly white owned banks. And so they are typically mission focused on the Black community. However, not only do they not receive enough support from us, but they also don't receive support from the federal government, not the same sort of support that traditional banks receive. They have a fraction of the assets of a mainstream bank, essentially, and they don't benefit from the same level of. They just don't benefit from the same level of support from government. They have significantly fewer resources to pull from to be able to support those communities. So we have to do our part in going out and finding them and letting people know about them, and then having those people that we tell about them and ourselves as well putting our dollars there. And it's not even just um, opening up account. While that obviously that would be great if you would open up an account, if you're going to get a loan, get it from a black owned bank. But also there are black owned banks that are publicly traded, right, on Wall Street. And so in most times they are not. It doesn't cost very much, right, to get some shares of a black owned bank, because again they're just not making enough money. So you can also support them by owning some shares, right, going out and getting some shares of those banks. And I believe that John is going to, yep, there they are, Carver Bancorp being one of them, and then Citizens Bank being another. And the reason that I asked for the ticker symbols to be there is because there's more than one Citizens Bank. We have a black owned Citizens Bank, which is that ticker symbol. And then there's another Citizens Bank, which is not black owned. And they are doing very well. They don't need you to go out and buy shares of their stock. So that's why I wanted the ticker symbol to be there so you can distinguish between the two.
You know, when we talk about that infrastructure stuff in banks, and I think early on Rob was talking about what are the barriers and things like that. We understand that, but you know, I'm kind of looking at what Killer Mike and the group are doing, the Greenwood Project, and
Yes.
you know, us all being military members. You know, I started thinking, you know, it might be smart because those are things you look for, being able to bank virtually and being able to bank online and do all of that stuff. So I think about like a framework, like maybe, and this is just me being solution focused. I got a solution focused mind, but think about the way USAA did it. You know, they didn't start out with a lot of, you know, they started in San Antonio. They had one location and they were covering everybody from one location. They eventually branched out and they have locations in different areas, but still it was more of you banked at an ATM or you had partner areas where you could bank or things like that. And I think, you know, maybe if, you know, a black bank went the technology route, the electronic route, the app route, and based it more on that than brick and mortar, you know, I think that's just something, and that's probably what they're doing. I need to look more into that Greenwood project, but that's probably what they're probably focusing more on, is having access to it through, you know, electronic and virtual means, instead of focusing on a brick and mortar and having branches and all that stuff.
And that's
So
a great point. And the one thing, you know, keeping in mind that solution focus uh, that I go to, because this is something that I think is affecting every community in this country, and that has to do with elderly people and how do they actually utilize financial institutions, and then, you know, what what's the younger generation do to make those you know, those things more accessible to them. You know, you can think about it with regard to banking. You can think about it with regard to healthcare. You know, you can think about it with regard to food insecurity. Uh, it, it's almost like a plague going on, you know, and everyone's moving around, chasing whatever they're chasing. And I'm just wondering at what point, are we going to say, you know what, we need to come together and at least address this. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, as I have, elderly parent who, guess what? If she got sick, it would cost to try and take care of her. And that's for anyone's parent, right? Where they don't have the means, or the retirement account to pay that bill for them. Because no matter what, it seems like that the cost of care continues to go up and continues to go up. And then when you look at what you're getting for it, it's like, wow, what are they spending the money on? It's certainly not the care, So I don't want to go off that into healthcare, but I know that, healthcare is definitely a topic as well regarding infrastructure. And I think the baby boomers, being the age that they are now, is going to continue to be a challenge, for this country, for the legislators. This country was not built or established, and is certainly not operating now to take care of our most vulnerable. That's the elderly and babies. That's not a solution, but I offer it up as something to certainly discuss and try to come up with, what could some of those solutions be, particularly now that I've moved off of banks into healthcare. I would like to get y'all's thoughts on that.
And real quick too, before whoever wants to jump in jumps in, I sometimes forget that we have listeners on other platforms outside of YouTube. So for those who are maybe listening on Spotify or some other platform, the ticker symbol that I was just referring to, that John did post, for those who are able to see it on YouTube, is for Citizens Bank is CZBS. CZBS. So that you don't confuse that Citizens Bank, the Black-owned Citizens Bank, with the other mainstream bank. And then the ticker symbol for Carver Bancorp is CARV. So I just wanted to put that out there real quick before we moved on.
Since Rob was talking about healthcare, and I know the topic was hospitals being involved or being in our communities. Wow, that is the cost. Like I said, Rob, the cost of healthcare is absolutely ridiculous. Like you said, the costs are going up and up and up. And unfortunately, we don't have any politicians that are willing to step in and limit the amount that people should have to pay for quality health care. But in the meantime, the quality of health care is going down and the costs are going sky high. And the cost for health insurance is going sky high. Where we're lucky, being retired military, we've got very decent healthcare insurance, where a lot of people are relying on Medicare, Medicaid, and they're still paying through the nose for that. But the hospitals being in good areas or in our communities, I know everywhere I've gone, I've never seen it. You have to travel to a hospital, or unless there's urgent care nearby, and you can go to urgent care. But I don't even recall seeing urgent cares in our communities either. So it is important. It is important for us to, because we know a lot of Black folk that are in the medical fields, but they have to travel outside of the communities. But again, it's all going to be predicated on we as Black folks going to support them if they come into our communities. And right now, I just don't think the answer is. I think the answer is still a no. It's a hard no.
Honestly,
Um,
I wish I had an answer. Um, I'm always willing to sit down at the table and talk through some things. But man, that's one of those things that I just don't have an answer for. I have no thoughts on even how to resolve that. I think healthcare in general, hospitals in general, are just a mess. And I think about, I was reading something. I honestly, I wish I could remember who it was so that I could give them the credit for what they were saying. But they were talking about public and private, right? And how healthcare operates in a free market, right? And so healthcare should not be a commodity. It should not be a good that can be bought and sold. It just should not be, right? When you think about New York and the public facilities there, right? And this is just, it's not just New York. I'm just using them as an example, but in Black communities in general, right? The public facilities that serve mostly poor and working class citizens are so underfunded, right? They operate on a the the ones in New York specifically. They operate on budgets with deficits as deep as $2.9 billion, right? Whereas private hospitals in upper middle class and in wealthy neighborhoods operate with a profit. Those that's something that's a statistic that I should not be having to read because again, healthcare should not be a commodity. And so how we resolve that, ugh, I don't have the answers. I really don't. Um, I just don't. I don't have the answers for that. I
Live in a capitalistic society,
yeah,
right? Uh, that was built on capitalizing on someone else, right?
yep,
You know, you could say capitalizing on my own ingenuity, my hard work, my knowledge, my willingness to do things others are not willing to do. I get all that, but it's also built on capitalizing on systems and institutions that were put in place, right, to make things maybe a little more challenging for some rather than others. You know, uh,
absolutely.
I remember, you know, going with my grandmother to the grocery store and pulling the cart. Anyone from the East Coast that grew up in the inner city know about
Yes,
the
sir.
cart. You put the bags inside the cart, you fill the cart, you know. Uh, and I just remember, I'm like, wow, you know, she's literally out here struggling just to get food. And then a lot of people are looking so to get food to live to do what? And I think that's where the hopelessness comes in, you know, because of the circumstances that people find themselves in. And and so for me, the solution, right? Thinking about solutions again, you know, having an elderly mother, uh, other elderly family members that, you know, that I've watched struggle and knew that they didn't have the means to go into. I mean, if you ever had anyone in your family, uh, and I had a stepfather that suffered with dementia, for instance, to go into a facility where they actually care for dementia patients as a private citizen, uh, you know, you're talking 6 to 10 grand a month. Six to 10 grand a month.
Man,
And then when you go in the facility, most people are sitting around literally like zombies,
yeah,
as opposed to trying to get them up, get them moving, you know, expose them to things that they really enjoy, music, you know. Uh, so I think that, so for me, I see the need, and quite honestly, I think, you know, from my perspective, my solution is I need to continue grinding so that I can open up an affordable place you know, for people to go to, you know, call it assisted living, you know, call it, you know, memory care for dementia patients, uh, just so that older folks can have some sense of, you know, dignity as they get older, right? Because we enjoy what we enjoy because of the generations before us. And I think we lose sight of that, you know, and because they can't get around and do all the things that they could do years back, you know, we think it's okay to just leave them behind.
See that for me is it all comes back to these elected officials. You know, a lot of the elected officials they only come into our communities when every 2 to 4 years because they want our vote. You know, but then we don't get anything from them. You know, they get our vote to get to either get into or stay in the office, but the promises that they do make, if they make any promises, they never follow through on them, and we don't hold their feet to the fire. They don't support us at all. You know, again, it seems like the ones that really uh, that are doing the most are doing it for the wealthy. They're not doing it for our community. They're not doing it for the marginalized communities. They're worried about, you know, what do I need to do to get reelected, or what do I need to do to get elected? Who's going to be the ones donating to my campaign? Well, it's not going to come from the poor Black community or the poor communities. It's going to come from people who have that are wealthy, or that have a little bit more than or a lot more than, you know, the working poor. You know, so I really think it starts with the elected officials. We have got to hold their feet to the fire, saying, you know, this is what we need in our communities. We need banks in our communities. We need quality schools. We need quality health care. We need grocery stores so people don't have to travel miles and miles to get quality food. You know, especially the way gas prices are going. You know, if you're making minimum wage, most people are working 2 and 3 jobs trying to keep the lights on, or, you know, or making business decisions as to whether or not they're going to be able to get their medication or they're going to get groceries. You know, so we really have to. I think we really need to hold the elected officials accountable, and you know, they need to pay that debt that they owe. You know, again, you want our vote. Well, this is what we need for you to continue to get our vote.
You know, just real quick to respond to that, I do think that, you know, obviously, you know, in the elections coming up, right? Midterms are coming up, and I hope everyone's going out to vote. We do have to hold them accountable. But with that said, we can't rely on that, right? We can't,
Absolutely not.
especially not
Absolutely
solely
not.
on that. And I think what Rod said, you know, obviously had a ton of merit to it. And I think we have to individually, we have to do our parts, but then also as a community, we have to do things to make things better, because if we rely on you know, elected officials to do anything, we'll starve, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we wouldn't get anywhere. So while yes, we definitely need to hold them accountable, we still have to be out and about
Absolutely.
and doing things to we have to be proactive. Essentially, we can't just, you know, sit back and say, well, you know, we're gonna vote, we're gonna try to make these elected officials do what they said they were going to do. Yeah, we got to go out and do different things as a group. You know, like when I think about it, I mean, when we came together as a group to start this podcast, right? It all started with us trying to be solution based and trying to figure out some things that we could do to effectuate change for Black men, you know, and for Black boys. And so it's that sort of thing that we have to do as a community if we're going to make any strides, you know, to improve our situation. That one is, yeah. I know this one is. I think Rod. Well, I think we all are. But Rod, I know I see that smile on your face. I know how passionate you are about this topic as well.
Yeah, yeah, because I think it's foundational
Yeah,
to
yeah.
most things that ail us in our community. Uh, you know, but I also know that aside from schools, you have to value knowledge and
Yes,
obtaining
yes,
it.
yes.
and information, right? That helps you. It helps you make better decisions, right? We just talked about holding politicians accountable. Well, God bless those that vote, uh, and God bless those that follow up on the politicians that they vote for, right? So it's enough to get us to the polls. Now you're saying you want me to write a letter or go visit the local office and let them know what's important to me and my community?
Right.
Well, I work, right? You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's and that seems to be the deal with everything. We have to do those things that are important to us.
Yeah.
We have to follow up, invest with our time and our resources. And quite honestly, I'm not sure that everyone's bought in with that notion. We want to vote and then expect them to do the right thing because we voted for them. These are human beings with their own priorities, right? And as you all know, how I campaign for office is always so much different than how I govern when I get in there.
Absolutely.
And it's because I know people are like squirrels, right? And they have a short memory. So yeah, they don't remember, the stories I told about what I would do or the lies I fed them when I was running. Just get me in there, So and then also, depending on what office it is, you can vote them in there. Like everybody thought that, President Biden was going to solve all that ails, especially Black and brown communities, because it was important to him. Build back better, Joe. I mean, look at what has transpired. You can't get priorities through, agendas because the systems of checks and balances work well when they don't want you to do something.
Yeah.
But anyway, it all goes back to that. But with regard to schools, we had conversations about, segregated versus not, the benefits versus not, and I think that there's good and challenges on either spectrum, depending on how you look at it, and what vantage point you come at it from. I just know that I've had the opportunity to engage with a lot of African American educators that just love teaching kids, right? Passing knowledge because they understood the importance of that knowledge and that education and the impact it could have on their lives as they grew and developed into adults. But is that the case in every community? And I would just tell you my own experience, going from, the inner city of Philadelphia, attending schools, to moving to Dover, Delaware for a short period. I had never had a Caucasian teacher, but I did when I got there, and I spent the first half of the first semester or grading period just trying to figure out how to deal with and understand her and what she was trying to teach me, So, and it was rough. It was rough in the beginning. But I will say it turned out to be one of the best educational experiences I've ever had. You know, shout out to East Dover Elementary. You know, yeah, and Miss Elizabeth. But you know, she made a tremendous impact on me.
This, with regards to politicians, and I think the subject of politicians comes up, fairly frequently, even if not, for a long time, in our episodes. But I don't subscribe to the fact that all politicians are bad, all politicians are crooked, and I feel like we often on here we kind of just throw that out there, like all politicians are crap, and I don't believe that. There's you can't convince me that in any sort of no matter what the job is, right? Not everybody's good, not everybody's bad. And politicians, just like any other career field, right? They're a microcosm of society at large. We have good people, we have bad people. So I do believe there are good politicians out there. I believe there are politicians out there that are trying hard to make changes. And I think some of them are succeeding here and there, and they're failing in some places. And quite often, and you mentioned it too, Rod, you talked about the checks and balances, and they're there for a reason. I get it, but then often it prevents a lot of things from getting done. Those checks and balances as well. Um, and so I do think there are a lot of politicians out there who are truly trying to make a difference and make things better for their communities and for this country as a whole. And with regards to schools, I think that one of the things that those politicians, any politician who might be listening to us and appreciates what I just said, how about y'all talk about changing how schools are funded, right? I mean, schools should not be funded based on property taxes. And essentially, I think something like 45 to 50% of school funding comes from property taxes. That's not the way schools should be funded. Your zip code shouldn't determine how good your education is, right? Schools should be funded based on needs, on the school needs. How much money does a school need? It doesn't matter what the zip code is. And I think that's a huge thing in maybe trying to change some of the issues that we have with public schools. Now, will that ever happen? I have no idea. I hope that it does, because that's one thing that, again, I wanted to throw out there, because
they should do schools like Chick-fil-A. Their brand, every school you go to gonna look like this.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's a shame, So the higher, if you're in when you're talking about these wealthy communities, obviously the property taxes are going to be more, so the schools are going to receive more, and it just should not work that way. It truly shouldn't. So, and I know we're starting to run a little low on time, so I'll leave it at that.
What can we do? So there's a part of it that's like, what do we need politicians to do, and then where is the stuff that we can do? And I kind of thought about putting this more like a closing thought, but I think it'll fit here. When I was in the military and I would run teams, and even throughout my career, I always talked about, you have your area of responsibility where you are. You might not be at the top, but wherever you are, treat that like your personal kingdom, and use that as your test ground for all these great ideas. So like when I got to be the chief of in-service recruiting, I had been doing stuff as an in-service recruiter, as a superintendent, as the sub for the chief of. So when I got there, I had some ideas that I already had proof of concept that it works. And I think sometimes what can be really disheartening is to look at the infrastructure and think, how do we make a whole city? But maybe that ain't where we can start. Let's start with a neighborhood, like if we got 100 investors together and we put something together in the neighborhood where we're able to buy, a street or two of houses, and start getting people and get incorporated as a neighborhood, get people in the neighborhood, open up a private school, a charter school, a Montessori school, something like that in that community, maybe. And then as we start to build that equity, have conversations with city council and be like, can we privatize some of the security around here so we're not over policed? And, maybe we can co-op some funds. We might not be able to start a hospital, but maybe we can start a clinic that can refer to hospitals for a higher level, because really, when we talk about our health and health care, it's not so much the big stuff. It's the fact that we don't do anything preventative, that when we got to go see the doctor, it's like a whole person growing out our chest by the time we decide to go. So like, if we can do the smaller things, and then work our way up to the bigger things, get some proof of concept. I really feel like that is not the cheat code or not the answer, but that's an idea that, it's something I've been talking to people, and I'm really interested in starting that in some areas. Like, we just kind of start small and build up progressively to getting more equity in our own neighborhoods. Because
you to go next.
Do we have time to kick around this grocery stores idea? Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I'll say I think that for this one, it's a lot like what Rod said. I think it's a matter of, whether it be me, you, somebody, right, going out there and opening up some grocery stores and trying to do some things to, and I know that there are a lot of Black owned grocery stores that have been started and have not been able to sustain for a variety of reasons. But I think, again, like Rob was talking about, starting, something for the elderly. I think it's just one of those things where, people who have the means to be able to do it, we have to go out there and try to do something about these food deserts, right? These areas that have limited access to nutritious foods. I know one of the main reasons why some of the larger supermarkets, like, say, Whole Foods, some of these grocery stores that are supposedly, healthy, right? Uh, they don't come to the hood because, they feel like we can't afford it, and by we, I'm saying Black people in general. So, when we talk about these food deserts, they tend to be inhabited, right, by low income residents. They don't have adequate access to transportation all the time. So then that makes them a lot less attractive to some of these places. So, it becomes dependent, it becomes incumbent upon us, us as Black folks, to try and do something about that, you know, starting grocery stores or doing whatever it is that we can. So I'll let someone else
The
go.
main thing is we got to support them. That's the main thing. That's I think that's why a lot of them fail, is because the Black community just does not support them. But that's all I had, man. I'm just gonna keep it short. So, Rod.
Okay. I feel Brother John now.
You can't make me disappear.
No,
I can
but
do it for him if he requests it, though. I can do it for him.
I know you would.
yeah, no, but I mean, I think the point, we've discussed it, and I would hope that anyone that views this episode would just understand that it takes all of us. It takes all of us to fight against the food insecurity in this country. I mean, just think about the amount of food that we throw away in America,
Sure.
and the number of people that can feed just here in America.
Right.
Right? I mean, I get, other countries need that help as well, and it's enough to feed them as, also. And again, I think it goes back to, collaborating and collectively pooling our resources to try and address, a specific problem. And I know that I in any measure of success that I ever have is because I want to be better positioned to do more to support others less fortunate. And I'm just hoping that we understand the importance and the value in partnering with like-minded folks, that want to come together and work towards solving a problem. It could be a specific problem that grows into something more. But I would challenge anyone. When's the last time you actually, went to a school, and spoke to disadvantaged young men that have not seen a man in a classroom, right, or outside the classroom, right, that's having a positive influence on them? Because we've got to be able to find ways to put hope back into people by helping them realize the possibilities if they would just go to school, get educated. Not so you can get into a good college, but just so you can be educated, because your talent and gift might be in something else. You might be a magician with your hands, right? So maybe you can be a carpenter or an electrician, So find what their talent is, what God has blessed them with, and then help to pour into them to pursue that thing, and then help them understand how they can build that into, a career or employment that will sustain them, or starting their own business. I think we have to do more of that, because otherwise, if we just, exchanging our time for money, it's a hamster wheel,
Yeah.
So, and I'll leave it at that.
My turn. All right. So me and my son were walking around probably a couple of weeks ago, and there's a Department of Human and Health Services here on the back end of my neighborhood. So you'll see homeless people, in the park areas from time to time, not anything crazy, but you'll see that every once in a while. And I remember on first look, I looked and I said, man, when I get rich, and, I'm going to come up with an infrastructure and we're going to do it because whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know how you do it in your arrogance. And, I had a moment to think about it. And I was like, that just reminded me of what tends to happen a lot is people come in and they think that their idea is so much greater and they try to reinvent the wheel when unbeknownst to them, there are people that are working hard every day trying to fight it. Like there are people on the front lines fighting hunger and homelessness every day. But my big idea is to start my own instead of supporting what they're doing. So I think something extremely important would be to any situation that we're concerned with, part of the infrastructure, helping young people. You agree with me, LJ? Helping the young people, all of that, is to get educated on who are the subject matter experts that are out here really dedicated, hitting the front lines every day, and find the ways that we can support people that are already doing it. Because if we continue to get groups of 4 and 5 that keep saying, I'm going to reinvent this wheel because my way is better, instead of finding ways to support people. And I really believe, man, that that we have to get to a point where we can lay aside some of our ideological differences. You know what I mean? Like there's Pastor Jamal Bryant had a meeting with Minister Farrakhan, and people got so mad at him. But I'm like, they're not talking about swapping the religions over or nothing. They're talking about how they can get together and help the community. Like, so does that mean I can't work with you because you don't go to, Shady Baptist Rock on the side of the road? You know what I mean? So like we can do that. But I think sometimes in our passion to help, we overlook doing the education to find out that there are people that are out there, there are groups and there are collaboratives and collectives that are out there on the, right there on the battlefield every day doing this work. And so if we can find ways to support, more so than we do, I think that'd be a great start.
Man, I love that point, John. I really do, because I think about it, and I go back again. I think this is probably the third or fourth time that I brought up Rod bringing up, starting something for the elderly. And I think to your point, you're exactly right. Instead of saying, well, yeah, that's a good idea, I'm going to start one too. How about saying, hey, you know what, Rod's planning to do this. How about we, maybe we collaborate, or I send some funds his way, or just try to support him as best I can in doing this versus trying to start my own. So no, I think that is an extremely valid and a great point. So I'm glad you brought that up. Anybody else have anything before we close out?
Thank you, Rod. I was sure about to jump in there.
Okay.
The only thing I got to say, go vote. I don't vote early or vote November 8th, but everybody needs to go cast their ballot. Go vote. Vote like your life depends on it, because it does. And that's all I got. Thanks,
I'm
Rod.
glad you didn't say early and often. I'm glad you didn't say that.
I was hoping that you didn't say often as well. But
no, I didn't slip up and make that mistake.
And I will just say, I think Kev brought up a good point earlier, and so I want to go on record to publicly apologize if anyone thought that I was even alluding to all politicians being bad, because I absolutely don't think that they are. It's like
I hope
saying,
you didn't feel singled out, because I know you don't feel that way. So yeah.
No, I don't. But I do think that that's a great point that you made, and it goes back to, I think, the spirit of partnership and collaboration, and just finding like-minded people that want to do something, right? And I mean, people talk all the time about their legacy and this and that. What is it that you are willing to do? Because if you're willing to do something, there are bunches of people and organizations that are out there, like you said, on the front line trying to do
Absolutely.
it. So I look forward to continuing to have this conversation even offline, because y'all some talented brothers, and I know that we do share some of the same thoughts about wanting to do something. So just figuring out the best way to do that. I'm here for it. So
absolutely. Yeah. So. All right. Well, it sounds like everybody has gotten in their last words, and this is a great convo. And I know that we will continue this offline, and as we continue as a group to try and do other things outside of just this podcast, but do other things to move the needle again on some of these things that can be done to effectuate change in the Black community. So, with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. And as we wrap up this week's episode, I want to leave you with a quote by a prominent leader of SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Stokely Carmichael, who, while explaining what he meant by Black Power, or what Black Power means, he stated, "It is a call for Black people in this country to unite, to recognize their heritage, to build a sense of community. It is a call for Black people to define their own goals, to lead their own organizations." Until next time, peace.